So this lesson shows us how organisms are built. So we're going to learn about levels of organization of life. We can simply say levels of life or the hierarchy of life. The levels of organization of life simply explains what makes up an organism. Just like everything in life has different components, living things also have their components. And these components depend on how far back you want to go. In this lesson, we will look at just 4 levels of organization of life, and they include the cell, the tissue, the organ, and the system. In some textbooks, we include things like atoms, molecules, and others. Starting with level 1, the cell. The very first and most basic level of organization is the cell. And as we know, the cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. And some organisms are perfectly content existing and thriving as just a single cell. So, their whole entire existence is just in one singular cell. We call them unicellular or single-celled organisms, and they are everywhere. These organisms are microscopic, meaning that you cannot see them with your naked eye, but they carry out all the Mr. Niger D characteristics inside this one single cell. At this level, one cell does everything, does all the eating, breathing, and reproducing. And make sure you watch our video on the characteristics of living things to learn more about Mr. Niger D or Miss Gren. There are millions of microscopic organisms out there, but we'll just look at 3 famous examples you must know for your exams. And they are amoeba, euglena, and paramecium. Other examples include the plasmodium, trypanosome, and chlamydomonas. Let's look at the amoeba. The amoeba has no fixed shape, and it is typically called shapeless, and it moves by stretching out parts of its body called the pseudopodia or the false feet. Next, we have the euglena. This organism has both plant and animal-like characteristics. It has a tail that we call the flagellum, which is used to swim like an animal, but it also has chloroplast, which it uses to make its own food just like plants. And then finally, we have the paramecium. This one looks exactly like the sole of a shoe or a slipper, and it moves around using tiny hair-like structures called cilia. Now, if you're preparing for your biology or WAEC exams, it is very important for you to learn how to draw these structures. So learn how to draw and label the amoeba, euglena, and paramecium. And if you have more time on your hand, and if you can't do it, then the other examples like chlamydomonas, plasmodium, and trypanosome. If these examples are helping you visualize your biology syllabus better, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button so this video can reach more students preparing for their exams. Also, watch our video on the cell to learn more about the cell structure and its function. This leads us to the level 2, which is the tissue. When a group of similar cells come together to perform a specific function, they form a tissue. Tissues can exist as part of a more complex organism like we see in some plants and animals, or exist solely as the organism. In higher plants, we have examples of tissues like the mesophyll layer in leaves, the epidermal tissue, the sclerenchyma tissue, the xylem tissue, and the parenchyma tissues in the stem. Animals, examples of tissues in animals include the muscle tissue, bone tissue, cartilages, and blood. Yes, blood is a tissue, a liquid tissue. Some organisms exist at the tissue level of organization of life, and examples include the hydra, algae, sponges, and fungi. They exist entirely as tissues. So the tissue is responsible for feeding, for breathing, for reproducing, and so on. This leads us to the third level, the organ. When different types of tissues combine to perform a major complex job, they form an organ. An organ is a group of similar tissues forming a layer in an organism which performs a specific function. Keyword, a specific function. Let's start with plants. A great example is an onion. Actually, an onion is a plant organ. Specifically, an onion is an underground storage organ that is made of thick, fleshy leaves designed to store food. The same goes for ginger, which is a horizontal underground stem called a rhizome. Their main job is to store nutrients so that the plant can survive tough, dry seasons. In animals, organs are everywhere. The most famous example is your heart. So, your heart is an organ that is made up of muscle tissue, nerve tissue, and blood tissue, all working together for one vital mission, which is pumping blood around your body. Other examples of organs include the lungs, the liver, the skin, the eyes, and etc. Each of these organs is responsible for performing specific tasks in the body. And then finally, we have the system or the organ system. When several different organs work together to carry out a massive function for the body, you have a system. Examples of system in animals are the digestive system, the reproductive system, respiratory system, skeletal system, nervous system, excretory system, and circulatory system. Now, some of these systems can be found in other types of living organisms like in plants and some other type of fungi. Take the excretory system in animals, for example. It is not just one part. You have the kidneys, which filter the blood, the ureters, that is the tubes, and the bladder, which stores the urine. All these organs come together to get rid of waste in the body. The reproductive system is another example. In mammals, this involves a complex network of organs that create new offspring. In plants, a flower is actually the reproductive system of a flowering plant. The petals, the stamen, and the ovary all work together to produce seeds and fruits. So, we've covered the four levels, but we're about to learn why being complex might be a disadvantage for some organisms. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you don't miss out on our next lesson. So, you might think being more complex is always better, but as life moves from a single cell to a massive system, there are some advantages and disadvantages. This leads us to the complexity of organisms. The higher up the level an organism reaches, the more complex it gets. Now, even though unicellular organisms can perform all of life processes, they still lack vital tissues, organs, or systems that is efficient and capable of ensuring their survival. As a result, higher organisms have advantages and some disadvantages in complexity over unicellular organisms. So let's look at the advantages. So, the more complex an organism is, the more easier the cells can specialize. So instead of doing everything, groups of cells develop into specific tissues designed to carry out a particular job. There's also body part specialization. These tissues further develop into specialized parts to perform specific bodily functions. In more complex organisms, cells work together. So they share the workload, basically division of labor, and they rely on one another to survive. In more complex organisms, there is better efficiency. Complex structures allow higher organisms to carry out their life processes much more effectively. Complex organisms also have bigger sizes. Organisms can grow larger because there are spaces between their cells for growth. And then the more complex an organism is, survival becomes easier. Complexity helps organisms to better adapt and resist harsh environmental conditions. So let's look at some of the disadvantages. The more complex an organism is, there is no cellular independence. Individual cells lose their independence and cannot survive on their own. They rely entirely on the activities of other cells. When an organism becomes more complex, there is slower resource delivery. So being larger makes it harder for the body to get oxygen, to absorb food, and to eliminate waste. There's also slower waste removal. It takes much longer for complex organisms to expel waste products than for a single cell organism to expel waste products. The more complex an organism gets, the more complex its reproduction becomes. So producing offspring is a much more difficult process for more complex organisms. There's also lower healing power. The ability to regrow or regenerate damaged body parts decreases as an organism becomes more complex. So let's quickly do a recap about the levels of organization of life. So we started with the cell. We have single cell organisms like amoeba. Then the cells group into tissues like the layers of the hydra. And tissues build organs like a plant bulb or a human heart. And the organs combine to form systems like the excretory system or the reproductive system. When we put all these systems together, you get a complete living organism like mammals, birds, plants, and etc. So, time for our question of the day. The human brain controls our thoughts and movements. Based on what we have learned today, what level of organization does the brain belong to? Is it a cell, tissue, organ, or a system? Drop your answers in the comments below. I'll be hearting the correct ones. And if you found this video useful, share it with your classmates. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet.